My name is JaKay Greer. I talk about the different textiles that women would make as a cottage industry and about wool and cotton. I normally have a spinning wheel here with me, but as a day tripper for this event, I decided not to bring the whole thing. So this is what you're seeing today. I have two collars that are right here. Collars were a way for ladies to fancy up their outfits with a small change. They would whip stitch this on all the way around and then go out. In 15 minutes I can put this on. In less than 5 I can cut it off. You just would go down the edge and cut it, pull it off, and you're back to your basic dress. There were over 30 different patterns that I've seen so far in crochet. There was a few that were knitted, but the collars tended to be either fabric or crocheted collars. Hairnets, yes, it's hairnets. 3 years before the Civil War and 5 years after the Civil War, they're called snoods. But our time period right here, they're called hairnets. Hairnets were a way to fancy up your hair. You would still dress it, that means fixing it. That's where we get the word hairdresser. And then you would stick this over the top, pull your strings, and tie it on. It would hang down over the edge so that you could have it. There were this is a very plain one, but there's lots of different designs. Lots of Irish crochet was made into hairnets. Gloves were a necessity, especially if you go to church. You did not walk outside the house without gloves very often. Poor did, but not the rich. As you can see, the back of the glove has a design to make it pretty. There's lots of different designs that you can put here. The front side is just knitting. I could have made this also into mitts, and that means without the fingers part. If you were too poor to afford knit gloves, you would take your shawl when you went into church and hold it in such a fashion that nobody could see your bare hands. And that way you could get away and still be modest and fashionable. If you grew up in my era, you still remember going to church with gloves on. That was it. A lady walking out of her house onto the street would have a hat, mitts, gloves of some kind, and a shawl. Without those three, she was undressed. She was still into her house outfit, not her street outfit. And there was a very much, you were not dressed unless you get there. These are reticules. Reticules is French for ridiculous. The French thought the ladies' purses were ridiculous, and they hung medallions, they hung tassels all over. This is very plain because I show the plain for people to buy them, and then they get to dress them up to fit their outfit. Over here I have raw cotton. A lot of people in Oregon have not seen raw cotton, and there are still seeds in here. Prior to Eli Whitney's cotton gin, it took 10 people up in a warehouse to pick out this seed in 1 hour for 1 pound for every one person out in the fields. 10 years after Eli Whitney created the cotton gin, you all of a sudden had one person operating the cotton gin by hand, steam, wind, or water power, river power. One person handling that equipment to every 10 people out to 100 people out. By 1863, slavery is profitable. This is the year that we're portraying here. Prior to the cotton gin, all the newspapers and magazines are talking about slavery dying out. It's not profitable. One piece of invention, technology changed everything. Plants look like this when they pop open, and they do pop like popcorn. You can see the barbs still on here. When you pull it, your hands are trying to go in between those barbs. Because if you don't, if your hands go straight down, you're going to rip your hands. Took a person about a week of picking cotton, 10 to 12 hours a day, to get their hands calloused enough so that when they picked it, they didn't bleed. For your first week of picking cotton, you're coming home with bloody hands. You're sticking your hands down into a bucket of brine, which is salt water. Yes, it stings, yes, it hurts, but salt water will help with the stop infection. And number two, it hardens and calluses up your hands. Both my grandmothers were cotton pickers, and both of them had scars for life. I also have wool, cotton. Cotton was trying to be shipped to Britain. The South really wanted Britain to have it. But the Anaconda Act was strangling the South, was blockading everything. So rarely was it getting out through the eastern coast. They were trying to ship it in wagons through Mexico.
Quick question.
Yes.
Did you said that the slaves picked the cotton, did they also operate the cotton gin?
Yes.
They did?
Okay. In the wartime, I want to say Charlottesville, but I think I'm wrong, Charlottesville, they had women and slaves operating the gin and the looms making cloth. They had 493. They were putting out over 50,000 yards of material a month. You're hearing that the South has no material, has nothing. The records say otherwise. There was less, but they were still getting things. They were getting the basics, not the fancies. They went through Brownsville, and I've just lost the M name, in southern Texas, where they were going through Mexico to ship. If they could get it to Mexico, the Union troops would not board those ships, and they could ship that. Right in 1863, Britain's not getting enough cotton. It wants thousands of tons more. Right now today, 90% of the world's cotton comes because the South wasn't getting Britain enough. Two countries, Egypt and India. They decided if we couldn't provide it, they would have one of their other colonies provide it. Wool, merino wool. Ladies, this is your nice sweaters, your shawls. It's expensive. It likes to drape. It is soft. Thomas Jefferson had merino wool, merino sheep in his plantation. This is Leisure. This has been carded so it looks fluffier and softer, but it's actually, this is the softest one. Leisure also comes from England, Western Europe, countries like France. And this is your wool dresses, your wool shirts. It's more sturdy, but it's still a thin wool. This is Cotsworth. Cotsworth is your, I want to be thick. I do not want to come apart easily. It's your uniforms and your wool blankets. It wants to mat and be matted. The term shoddy comes from the wool cloth that was made during the Civil War. They were wanting to cut some, the manufacturers of wool were cutting some corners. They decided to take the end cuttings off of, when they cut out the uniform, there's always some left over. They'd spin it, make it back into wool cloth, and then make another uniform out of that. Shoddy means the leftover ends made into that. A soldier would be given a shoddy uniform, about 2 thunderstorms. You could take the cloth and just literally pull it apart just by shaking like this. That's where we get our word now, shoddy work, is because of shoddy material. I have one other example. Even though it wasn't much in the Civil War era in the eastern states, it was a sheep of breed that was in the United States. It comes over with Christopher Columbus on his 2nd and 3rd trips, as he did not like the food that we had here in the Americas. He wanted what they knew. He brought chickens, sheep, and cattle. They were supposed to be for food. Some of them did get wild. The conquistadors added horses because they wanted their riding and they wanted their food. Slowly but surely, from South America and Central America, churro came up through South America, Southwest America. The Navajo and the Apache still weave their blankets and rugs out of churro sheep. Sir, do you have any questions for me?
Nope, I think you covered. Oh, one.
Yes.
Why did they cut this lace off, or feel that they had to cut it off quickly?
Because I want a different look.
Ah, okay.
I went out already in this one. This evening I'm going to choose another one.
Yeah.
I still have the same bodice on.
So they can reuse it.
I could, oh, yes, this will go back in, this will get washed, put back in my drawer,
Yeah.
and be used for a different dress,
Okay.
a different occasion. I wanted a way to extend my clothing without having the expense of making more clothing.
Thank you.
You're welcome.